Welcome to Afterlives of Ancient Egypt, in which we discuss ancient history and relevant current events. I'm Kara Cooney, and I love to take deep dives into history that are not always possible in academic formats. So let's get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Kara Cooney, your host of Afterlives of Ancient Egypt, and I am joined by my indomitable, indefatigable Amber Myers. And we are going to work through a part 2 of the coffin reused for Thutmose III, because I think there is more that we can and need to say, which is fun. And for this article, it's already up and out. It's published on an MDPI open source journal called Arts, A-R-T-S. So if you Google, we'll put it in the show notes, but if you Google my name and Arts and the coffin of Thutmose III, you will find it. And there's all kinds of information here about how the things taken from a coffin during a time period of chaos and scarcity are restored with lesser versions, but still magically potent versions. So it's a fun, practical sort of exercise that we're going to go through this time. But first, Amber, how are you?
I'm doing well. But yeah, this article is open access, and so we'll have the link there. Everybody can go to it. There's the images accompanying the article, so I thought that this was a great way to go about this part 2, because people will have access to exactly what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
if anyone wants to, if you haven't listened to part 1, you might want to. It's not necessary, but you might want to before you dive into this discussion, just so you have a little bit of context about the interventions and things that were happening, in particular to the coffin of Thutmose III, but we also address sort of the situation more broadly. And so that might be a good thing to check out before you jump in here if you want a little bit of the backstory. But I think that just jumping in and listening to this episode is you won't be lost.
Yeah. I'm more and more convinced that this coffin was not originally made for Thutmose III, but it's hard to exactly know. There's only one clue, and I'll get there towards the end of this podcast episode, that suggests that it's not originally for Thutmose III. We can discuss. But yeah, how do you want to break this down? Do you want to show images? And since we've moved to this video reality, where
right,
people
yeah.
can see us,
We're trying to do video now, so good luck.
Yeah.
So it's very simple, guys. I'm sorry, I am not a video editor. I'm sure I'll get better as time goes on. But look, this is a DIY operation, so
run out of my office.
We do
her bedroom.
We do our best.
Yeah, this is what we do. Yeah.
Well, first, you want to make like maybe say a couple of things just in general about king's coffins as objects of power, and then we can jump into restoring the elements that you discuss in your article.
Yeah. So just to recap a tiny bit, in the late 20th and 21st dynasties, the high priesthood of Amen is using the Valley of the Kings and Dra Abu el Naga, the 17th dynasty graveyard before that, royal graveyard, as a bank vault, if you will. And in doing so, over generations, they are pulling out kings and queens and royal personages, their coffins, their bodies. They are taking valuables, but they are simultaneously using these royal personages as talisman, if you like, as protective agents, as divinized ancestors, as icons of kingship, as almost like little divine effigies in a sense, but in human mummy form. And so they create this very complicated relationship of give and take between these erstwhile kings on earth and themselves, who are the nascent warlords become kings and high priests of Amen. And this really starts to pop off in the high priesthood of Pai Ankh and the high priesthood / kingship of Herihor, and continues into the high priesthood of Penejim I, and on through Masaharta into the high priesthood of Penejim II, and into the 22nd dynasty, it seems. At which point they are cached. They're like, we're done with these guys. We're not going to worry about them anymore. They put all of the king's coffins away in whatever form they had taken after the couple hundred years that they were doing this, pulling out, take some stuff, put it back in, but they modify them each time they take out the coffins and the bodies of these kings. By the time they cache them in the early 22nd dynasty, they're using two main caches. It's a complicated story, and there's more, but we'll stick to those two for now, which is Kings Valley 35, KV 35, the tomb of Amenhotep II in the Valley of the Kings, is kind of a shitty cache for the kings they don't want to be associated with. The solar kings like Amenhotep III and his father Thutmose IV, the later Ramessids like Ramses VI, like we don't want to associate with them. We're going to put them away in this cache. There are no surviving kings' coffins in that cache. And what I mean by that is that there's no coffins that are crafted with a Nemi's headdress or with a crook and flail or with any elements that suggest that there were coffins there made originally for kings. They're put into old elite coffins, modified for them in some cases not. But with their names usually written in some form on the coffin or on the shroud. But in Dir el-Bahri 320, also known as Titi, Theban Tomb 320, in Dir el-Bahri, up and to the left of Hatshepsut's Temple of Millions of Years, kind of to the left of Mentuhotep II's mortuary temple and tomb, you have another cache, and here you have surviving kings' coffins. And those are the coffin that was reused for Thutmose III, which we talked about in the last podcast. The coffin that was reused for Second Enrei Tao, I think that also was not originally to him. I think it's too late in style to have originally been that 17th dynasty king's coffin. The coffin that was reused for Ramses II, which many have already argued convincingly, including Nick Reeves, that coffin was not originally made for Ramses II, but he is reburied in it. And then finally, and most interestingly perhaps, is the coffin that was reused, the coffin of Thutmose I, that is originally Thutmose I's coffin, it has his name on it and everything, that was reused for Penejim I. Because it's Thutmose I, Hatshepsut could have had something to do with that coffin. So maybe it wasn't original, because we know from his sarcophagus that she had him reburied in a sarcophagus during her reign. Like I said, it gets complicated, but there are four that were, and 3 out of the 4 have Nemi's headdresses. And a Nemi's is not something you can add. It sticks out, right? Like a triangular sort of thing. And it's there as something that needs to be there originally. Only the coffin of Thutmose I has the original just headcloth, a divine striped headcloth. And that seems to be cool with Penejim I to take over, and he mimics that striped headcloth. So that's where we find ourselves with the king's coffins that survive in the royal caches. And yeah, so I'll stop with that little monologue.
No, that's great. I think that's a great summary of some of the background information that's going to be useful for listeners to hear. So a couple of things. So one, you made the point in the last episode that when they took something, they were also careful to add something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's important to point out. And then what this discussion is going to be about certain elements, religious, ideological, iconographical, that they felt needed to be restored to these coffins once they had been, I don't know how do you want to put it, reused or
down.
Yeah.
It's a really useful exercise because it helps you understand what the Egyptians thought were the bare minimum of magical efficacy. Because we argue all the time, how do you create magic? What is magic? What's religion versus magic? And by looking at them manipulating the bodies, the coffins, you see this give and take. Well, we're taking the gold. Taken most of the gold, not all maybe, but most of the gold. And if we take most of the gold, then what do we have to put back? So you see an understanding that there needs to be something yellow, something that is solar. And so you take the gold, you give some yellow, and you may in your mind go, oh, come on, what a cheat. And in a way, yeah, it is, but it's also, how do you create magical efficacy? And what does a king's coffin essentially need to have him safe, protected, fed, clothed, and transformed into a god in the next world? Because you need that. You don't want some pissed off king coming at you and saying, why did you do this to me? Why did you leave me in this state? And I'm not going to help you anymore. You want the king like, oh, the dead king, right? Thinking in his magical place, oh, thank you for keeping me safe in this time period of crisis. I'll give back to you if you give to me, kind of a give and take, which is the way that Egyptian royal religion seems to have worked. You go to any temple, Karnak, you go to a temple on the West Bank, Temple of Millions of Years, Deir al-Bahri, you see the king giving to the god giving back to the king. And that's kind of what we've got going on here, but in coffin and body form, in a very visceral, human, elemental form.
Yeah, sort of the bare minimum, but also the other side of that coin is the most essential, right? Like here are the very core essential things. And I think it's very interesting to think about, okay, gold, okay, replace it with something yellow. It's interesting to see the ancient Egyptians working within their own ideas of materialism and materiality. It's like, okay, here's how we're flexible within our thinking here. So yeah, it's also very practical.
It is.
Because they're here, they were there at least in part, right? Because they're wanting to access the bank. They need resources. It's a time of some transgression and scarcity. And so they're there for a very practical reason. And so it's also, okay, we don't necessarily have this gold to contribute back. We're here to take it because we need it, but we're going to leave something here that will ritually replace it. And I think in their minds probably was meant to be just as effective as the original materials. So that's also, I think, an interesting point to think about.
Yeah. So give something back for what you have taken. If you end up ripping a body apart to get all of the amazing amulets made of precious materials off of it, wrap that body back up in fine linens with careful ritual. And that's the part we can't see. There are magical elements that are embedded in these bodies and coffins that we don't get as archaeologists because they can't be materially preserved. You can't materially preserve the speech that somebody is professing over a coffin as they wrap a limb, but you do have a carefully wrapped limb, and you have actual flower garlands placed, 21st dynasty flower garlands placed on the chest of the body or on different parts. And you know that every time you place something on a body, you have an incantation of some kind of magical spell of protection. So even though you can't go back in time and know what spells they're saying, you can say, okay, well, we have these actions that were being done. And with the assumption that each action is accompanied by a spell, then you can reconstruct some of the magic that's going into these rewrappings, reburials.
Yeah, I think
re-ossirification. We cannot forget.
Exactly.
It is a re-ossirification.
I was just about to point that out. We do have a past episode on re-ossirification, so I will put a link to that in the show notes for this episode. But I think that that's a very good point to make sure that people understand, which is that you're not looking at this as if it's not ritualized in some way, right? It's not like they're going in and just like willy-nilly grabbing things or whatever. There's a ritual. There would have been a process to it, because they have to, in their own ideology, in their own minds, it has to be right? They have to do it piously. They have to do it in the right way, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're not trying to hide it. I mean, they're trying to hide it from the larger populace and arguably even from the larger Amen priesthood in Thebes, but they're not trying to hide it from each other. It's not like, oh, I took some gold, I better put a little bit back so someone won't notice. It's not that. It's, oh, I took the sheet gold, I'm going to put back some gold leaf because the king needs and wants it, and that will help me to have a better relationship with this divine ancestor to get what I need. So it's more of an effective give and take of how these things work. And it also has the feel of, when you're reading a novel or you're watching an old television show about the war, and people are like, oh, during the war, we had our ration cards, or we only filled our tub up this much, with water because we were all rationing this or that because the soldiers needed it. There is a feel of a forced or willed austerity that is imposed on the people in the here and now. And the people in the here and now are going back to a time when there was great plenty and abundance and saying, we need some of that. Can we take from the past, the abundance of the past, give it to the now, and we will give to you magic and make sure that you have what you need going forward. So there's this weird time travel going on in the manipulation of these bodies and these coffins that is very interesting to see in the ritual manipulations that are preserved in the materiality. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great point. So should we dive in
Yeah.
and start talking about
Yeah.
these different elements that they were restoring to the king's coffins?
I love it. Yeah.
All right, so the first one that you discuss in your article is restoring the element of gold. Also, what is that? Directly connected to the sun, right? So restoring the element of sun and gold. What do we have to
Can
say
you
about that?
show the
Yes.
coffin lid of Tutmosis the Third? Remember, Tutmosis is Jehuti Mes in Egyptian. We're using the Greek because that's the accepted form for most people. It's what most people know. You could say Thutmose. This isn't an easy name for everyone to agree on. Sometimes I get freaked out and I'm just like, let's just all say Jehuti Mes, but then it wouldn't show up in any searches. It's super frustrating. But Jehuti Mes the Third, Thutmose the Third, or Tutmose the Third, however you want to do it. Tutmosis for the full Greek.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I will do this. But first, there we go. Share.
It's all good.
Let's see. Here we go. So I hope that this will be okay. We'll pull up the image that comes with your
That's great.
article. Can you see it?
That's perfect. And keep it there. I think that's really evocative. That's really useful.
Let me pull it down a little bit. Yeah.
So you need to see that this piece has undergone many series of manipulations, and you kind of have to go with the last one first and then go back in time and use the piece stratigraphically, like an archaeological excavation, if you like. But what you first see is, whoa, they just shaved the face off and they stripped down, like the nose is missing, the mouth is missing, the eyes are partially missing because somebody took a chisel and just swept down the body to take that gold leaf that was there. That arguably happened just before they cached it, or even partially in the cache. And we'll leave that there, but it was a final moment that was done when everybody knew this coffin and this divine effigy would no longer be displayed in a temple or in any other space, that it would no longer walk in procession. It would no longer be manipulated by the high priesthood of Amun. It's put away in a sense. And as such, they're like, fine, I'm going to take my last little bit. And they don't do so in a very careful manner. You can see there's reasonable areas, surface area of gold leaf remaining. So that's where I want you to focus, because this coffin, or Tutmosis the Third's original coffin, whatever that may have been, if this wasn't it, would have almost certainly been covered with sheet gold. And when I say sheet gold, I want you to think of the coffin of Tutankhamun and think of the thickness of the gold. There's no thin gold leaf applied to that kind of king's coffin, but a rather substantial sheet of gold that is molded around the wood and takes on the sculptural elements of face and body. And that was removed because of its value, because it could be used to pay off soldiers, because it could be used to pay off employees. It could do all kinds of things, right? That's removed. And in its stead, some other version of gold is reapplied. And the amount of chiseling that I've been able to determine, at least 2 layers of chiseling, suggests to me that they removed sheet gold and applied gold gilding, gold leaf, immediately after. And then it was a nicer gold leaf, which they then removed. And then they reapplied an even thinner gold leaf. So we have 3 versions of gold applied to this particular king's coffin. And what you see here is just that bit that's remaining to the piece. So you take gold, you have to put gold back. The other way you could go about this, is it easy for you to pull up the coffin of Ramses II?
Hang on just a second and we'll find out. There we go. Okay. So I believe you've got an image associated with the article here. Wow.
And I'll try not to make you move around too much.
Yeah, I can't think of any other reason why the computer would be this slow, because it is not when I'm not on Zoom here. And scrolling.
That works right there. Right there.
Go up here.
Yeah, that's
the
good.
Interior of the coffin.
That works.
Okay. Pull this.
Okay, cool. So here we've got an image of the interior trough or case of the coffin reused for Ramses II. And you can see that it's been manipulated. Some areas have been removed. These case sides have been thinned down considerably, so much so that there's a hanging mortise and tenon joint on the coffin's right shoulder, which is super interesting. It means that they removed multiple centimeters of width from the coffin sides. But do note the interior, which is covered with a yellow paint, right? So that yellow paint almost certainly replaces a gold leaf that was on the interior of this piece, like a complete gold leaf, and or even maybe gold sheeting, right? So if you look at the coffin of Tutankhamun, you're like, oh my God, there's gold sheeting everywhere, right? Inside out. It's important to place the king's body into a container of gold sheeting of that expensive material, because that's what's going to transform him into a divinity. And you know what I should have mentioned at the very top is that gold is, of course, the flesh of the gods, right? So that when you cover the king with gold, you are giving him the flesh of the gods. He becomes a divine effigy in every way. So in this coffin reused for Ramses II, you see that the gold leaf has been removed. Before that, the gold sheeting has been removed. So what they've replaced it with is this yellow paint, which I don't think has been tested, but it has a nice bright light quality. I suspect this is a mix of yellow ochre, that standard yellow, but mixed with orpiment, which is an arsenic-based, more sparkly yellow. And I think that's what they've done here to place the king into a nest of gold, into a skin of gold, if you like. So the coffin of reused for Thutmose III, they don't really use yellow paint because they're using gold. The interior is a different kind of story. They don't use yellow paint there either. They use other things, which we will show you. But I think that's a good place to go back to the interior of Thutmose III to talk about the next element, Earth.
Use the X this time. Apparently that's what I should have done.
Oh, that's perfect. Right there.
Right there.
Perfect.
It's like you organized it and everything, like you were going to publish it. Here we go. Okay, it's thinking a minute, but I'll readjust here. So this is the interior of the coffin case used for Thutmose III.
That's a great image. So you get the idea of how much thinner, even than the coffin reused for Ramses II, the case sides are in the coffin reused for Thutmose III. And you can see that there's been many interventions. You can see, we talked about this in the last podcast, the mortise and tenon joins right there on the left and the right, how they've moved from the interior out to an exterior as the case sides get thinner and thinner. You can see the same thing on the lid, of course. And what's happening is that as they remove, they're not going to remove the interior or the exterior unless there's something to remove. So I think we should assume that there was sheet gold on this coffin, and that then when they reused this particular coffin for Thutmose III in the first instantiation, they added gold leaf of a significant thickness, a nice gold leaf, not the shitty gold leaf that's there at the end, but on the exterior, but the interior had gold leaf as well, which was then chiseled away, removed. They then smooth down the insides, and the case sides get ever thinner. To deal with that removal, they're no longer placing the divine effigy, the mummy, into that nest of gold, they need to replace it with something. They don't replace it with yellow paint exactly, though there might be some on that foundation underneath that gilding. But what we see is many layers. And let's can you zoom in a little?
Hang
Is
on,
that
I actually have
possible?
a touch screen here, so
Oh, perfect.
there.
Perfect.
Where do you want to go?
No, that's fine. Stay there.
It's good. Okay.
So you can see that there's a varnished layer underneath a black layer, a varnished white layer, whitish yellow layer underneath a black layer. And so it is possible that the first thing that they put down after they remove any gold leaf or gold sheeting or both in two instantiations, they then put protective iconography on there, which we'll get to in a moment. That's another element that's being restored. And then they create this netting pattern that protects the king. It's like they're putting him into a sacred net. And for that, you should look at Nick Brown's article in Mitteilung der Deutschen Archäologischen MDAIK, Institutes Cairo. So sorry. I got there eventually. But look in that journal. We'll put a link to that up as well. And he talks about this net pattern and other parallels, and you can find more information.
Is it okay? So this is like a genuine question on my part here. Is it netting or is it a mat? I'm just thinking of pre-dynastic burials and wrapping in mats and.
No, you're right. It's a mat, and I'm just using different words.
Okay,
so
okay. Just want to clarify. Okay. Because I'm trying to think of the ideological or the religious significance of it, and I'm thinking of those mats wrapping bodies,
like a palm rib mat or some other matting, and used that to wrap. And so they've taken that divine vegetal element and they've drawn it onto the coffin, and you can just see the striations, the black lines going down the center where the black resin has been removed by, I assume, Dynasty or other archaeologists. But so you have a protective iconographic encasement for Thutmose III when he's reburied in this piece. And then they add to that what I would call an earth element. And that's the black resin that's pretty obvious for everyone to see, that they cover over the inscription and all of the netted matting that they've drawn so carefully on there with these very straight lines. They cover that over with this black resin so that when they lower the body, the divine effigy of Thutmose III into the coffin, they're putting him into an Osirian nest this time. He's joining the black earth. He's part of the fecundity of the first mound of creation, that first earth that rose from the Nile, that alluvial silt that is deposited from which all grain grows. And so he's almost like a corn mummy being placed. And I use corn as the British understanding of grain, the grain mummy that will create new life.
Right, right. It, like to be reborn again through Osiris, literally going into or through. And the other thing I'm thinking as you're saying this, like they're encasing these kings in layers, right? So the gold on the outside, you've got the iconographical in this case, and on top of that, the Osirian with the black resin. So it's just like layer upon layer of protection and insurance that they're going to continue, I guess in this case continue, right, to be exist in the afterlife, or as in the re-Osirification episode, maybe like a repetition of that rebirth that they originally had when they died. It's interesting to think, how would they have conceptualized this idea?
Yeah, it's super interesting because I think it changes with each instantiation, and it's up to us to then decide, well, is this all one layer? Is this protective matting one layer, and then they pulled out the divine effigy and then they added the black? Or did they add this layer and feel, no, it wasn't enough, it now exists as a magical thing, it's been activated with ritual incantation, now we add the black resin, which is a very complicated material with imported different imported elements like pistacia resin from the northern Mediterranean, actual bitumen petroleum from Arabia, wax, oils of different kinds, frankincense, myrrh. You mix that all up. You cook it for forever. Like cook it down into a rich sauce, if you like. And you get this black resin that you then pour on there and then paint on the surface. Was it all one layer? You also ask yourself, well, what was there before? Was it the same kind of netted matting, this matting pattern, but in gold, like drawn into a gold leaf and sized into a gold leaf? And that's quite possible. We can't know, it's gone, right? And just by looking at the thin case sides, you know that it's part of the thickness of this entire piece, the actual wood itself that was removed. So we can surmise what may have been there, but it's not an easy, it's an impossible task in some ways.
Of course, yeah, it's completely impossible, but where's the fun in not speculating?
I know, I know.
But yeah, I also, when it comes, I know we'll get into the iconographical here in more detail in a little bit, but I am also reminded of the ancient Egyptians in some ways thought of the sky as a mat, and we know about newt covering coffins, and so it's like the sky, the earth, or everything is everywhere all at once for the ancient Egyptians. And so when you start to really break it down, it does get really complicated really quickly.
It does. And when you think of it that way as an element of the sky, because you are putting the deceased in any coffin inside of the duat, inside of the sky. And then when you think of the matting, you think of the tracks that the stars and the planets take. You have the elliptical track that the roving planets take, and then you have the other tracks that the fixed stars move on as they move around the earth. And that could indeed be what this matting is representing with these lines. The lines are straight, but they curve in at the side. So you get an understanding that the Egyptians knew they were dealing with a roundness to their earth. Anyone looks around at the horizon and they see a round plate, right? They're standing on a round plate, and then a round half hemisphere is above them. And then the lines follow in that pattern. So if you're not really able to see it, but on the curving top of this coffin case, you actually see the lines move in a hemispherical way around the edges of the piece. And one wonders if that's meant to be like the stellar tracks. And now it puts the deceased effigy in the center, like Earth itself. You're in the center. Like any horoscope, astrological horoscope, you're in the center, and all the planets then swirl around you. I do think that's what you have here. It's really cool.
Yeah, that is super cool. So is there anything else that you want to add about this Osirian or Earth element?
Just to remind people that if you become an effigy of gold and you're a sun god, it doesn't mean that you can't also, on the inside, become an effigy of Earth and become Osiris. So the two things are by no means mutually exclusive. In fact, the 6th hour of the Amduat shows us that the corpse of Osiris must join with the spirit of the sun god and thereby give off new light. That melding is what needs to happen. So you see that actually performed in the coffin of Thutmose III, even in this last instantiation, which is the most poverty stricken. It's still there. It's still there and for us to see and examine. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've already gotten into it a little bit, but you also discuss in your article the restoration of protective iconography.
Correct. So and I think looking at this piece, can you scroll down at all? Do we have yeah, that'll work.
Are we looking here?
Scroll down to yeah, just down a little bit. That works.
I see.
So you have the matting preserved. You have the name of the king barely recognizable for you. This is part of a whole long text that is calling out to the sky mother Nut to protect Osiris, Thutmose III. He is named Osiris, right? So, and then the matting is there as that protective iconography. Now, if you look at the seams, particularly the one on the right, I think you can see it more clearly.
Sorry, which right? Our right or the coffin?
The coffins left are right.
here.
Right. Yeah, right there. Perfect. And and then you can see that one protective element that's included is a wash of red paint. Red was considered this protective Sethian element of the desert. The desert, the Egyptians knew, protected them from, they would go into West Asia on their invasions, not maybe in the Third Intermediate Period. Well, in 22nd Dynasty, Shawshank did, right? Shawshank the First. But and Thutmose the Third certainly did. They know that West Asia, the city of Megiddo, is completely overrun because it's not protected or surrounded by anything. It's there on a crossroads between the Levant and Syria, and it's just, it's a place of many battles. And I don't know, it's like the Poland of, of the ancient Middle Eastern world. And the ancient Egyptians knew that having a massive desert on the east, having a massive desert on the west, having a massive sea to the north, and having all the cataracts and more desert to the south, it protected them. It gave them a force field, if you like. And so every coffin, ideally, should have a force field. And elite coffins often have like a nice thick red that is often varnished over on the seams. They're messing with the seams over and over again, right? They're putting in new mortise and tenon joins. They're cutting them down. That black bituminous resin is covering over part of the seams. You can see that was applied after the seams were cut down. There are little bits of gold leaf remaining on those seams, which indicates that what was once there was a gold leaf protective barrier, a divine protective barrier. When that was removed, the priesthood that's doing the incantations and the reosserification is like, whoa, we have to add that protective barrier back. And they take a wash of red paint. It's a weak wash, right? But they add it to the seams nonetheless, almost certainly with protective incantations. Like, think of your pyramid text protective incantations. And I think that's what the kind of thing that would have been spoken aloud as they're painting that on the seams. And think of how we use red. Think of how we use red as a red door, right? On a house, you paint your door bright red because it's meant to keep out the evil eye or the devil or whatever it is. You put your children in bright red clothing because it's like a little Red Riding Hood. Go out in your red cloak because it'll protect you. We do still think of red in this way, and the Egyptians certainly did. So that's one element.
And one other aspect to the symbolism of red that you always like to bring up is blood.
Yes. Yes.
Specifically, I would think blood to do with birth.
How do you see that?
How do I see that?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, especially because I think we're looking here, is this not the body of Newt that we can kind of somehow see the feet, and then you can follow that up and you can see the thigh area.
And her arms are outstretched right there in the middle of the screen. Her arms are outstretched. They're covered over by that black bitumen, but you can kind of see there's the modius on her head and then the outstretched arms.
Yeah, it's difficult to see. But you think of the body of Newt and the birth of the sun each morning from the body of Newt, from her vulva. This is the sun coming out of the birth canal, right? And into a bloody sunrise, if you will. And so do you think that is appropriate, right? To think of the red in that way as well? Or
I do.
Okay.
I love it. I love it because then you think of the redness that surrounds the newborn baby is now surrounding the dead individual, and that blood that the mother gives to her child that caused so many deaths in antiquity. I have to assume that kind of, if it went into hemorrhaging, but that blood is a life's blood that the mother gives to the child, and here it is potentially drawn around the circuit of the coffin for the dead. I think that's great.
Yeah, and in some ways, practically speaking, it helps to facilitate the physical birth because the baby with the blood and other fluids is nice and slick, and hopefully will slide out easily. Because
just enough,
if it doesn't,
not too much.
I was going to say, if it doesn't, there could be problems. But yeah, so I think that's interesting to think about whenever you consider the color red.
Right, and then the sky goddess we discussed. Do you have an image of the lid? I think do you have anything you want to add for the interior?
No, I think that we covered some of the most interesting aspects there. So we're looking for the lid of Thutmose the Third.
Or Ramses too, but Either one, it's fine.
Sorry, guys. I don't mean to make you like a little motion sick here, but how's
That works. That
okay?
works.
I'll pull
Yeah.
this up.
Now this is the coffin we use for Ramses II. And I, for those of you that have had your art historical classes in Egyptology or visit many museums, you may notice that this face looks a lot like Tutankhamun. It has a very post-Amarna, we would call it, we Egyptologists would say, sort of feel. That concave lid of the eye, the very full lips that often have a downturned sort of shape to it. Just the shape of the face and the nose. It looks like a Tutankhamun. It has a Tutankhamun feel. Nick Reeves has dated it to Horemheb. I'm fine with that. I think it probably was reused for Horemheb. I don't know if it was originally for Horemheb. I have thoughts and feelings about that. But note that we have a wooden uraeus, a wooden crook and flail. These things will do double duty. And we're going to put in two. Let's do the protective and the kingship together, Amber, because otherwise I think it's going to be, or do you think we should come back to some of those things?
No, I think that we'll meld some of these things together because I think you're absolutely right. They all fit together, so it's hard to address one without playing into the other.
I think essentially what I'm going to do now that we have this image up is just talk about kingship first, and we'll go back to protective stuff.
Sounds great. Yeah.
So if you've got a coffin that provides the elements of kingship with gilding or gold sheeting, or a lapis lazuli head for the uraeus, which you have on many of Tutankhamun's pieces, some precious things that have been removed and taken, it seems that the ancient Egyptians of the 20th and 21st dynasty knew they had to give back those elements. So they remove maybe a solid gold uraeus. I don't think that's crazy. I think that's what we have on the coffin sets of Tutankhamun. They remove that. They need to put back some version of kingship. So you have a wooden uraeus here. When they put that uraeus back, they did some interesting things, because can you zoom in at all on that uraeus?
Uraeus, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a little hard to see, but that uraeus was once a double uraeus, like you see on the coffin set of Tutankhamun. You have a vulture and a cobra. You also see that on the canopic jars of Horemheb, a vulture and a cobra. So it matches in that way. But for the 21st dynasty, they didn't find this appropriate for Ramses II. That double uraeus does seem to be very much a post-Amarna element of kingship for a number of reasons that I'm working on in different research and will reveal later. But they felt the need to turn it into a single uraeus. And they did. You can see the other uraeus hole plugged up and covered over. And you can see that they have centered this uraeus so that it's single. So they're not only restoring kingship, but they're restoring the version of kingship they think was most appropriate for Ramses II. So that's super cool. And then if you scroll down, they've also restored a crook and flail that, if we compare to Tutankhamun, was made of golden elements and blue glass, and even some real lapis lazuli elements. They've removed those, reused them in whatever ways they need to, and then they've traded those out for pure wooden elements that are painted, and that seems to do the trick, right? So we're restoring that element of kingship. They've restored a royal beard. What do we have before? Think of Tutankhamun. He would have had a royal beard made of gold, blue glass, and I think maybe some other elements in there, some other precious woods for that inlay. That's taken, and then we have this simple royal divine beard added in its place, an Osirian beard. So that's pretty cool. You take from the king, you give back to the king. Even and another thing we were talking about the yellow paint. This entire surface of the coffin for Ramses II is also colored with a yellow wash. It doesn't really look like it in this image. It looks like bare wood, but it's not. It's covered, and you can see it on the ears. Look at the ears. Oh, we're right there. You're right, Amber, to go down. Yeah, right there. You can see that yellow paint more clearly in the crevices where it hasn't really been washed away. But they felt it was important to make him an effigy of gold again, even without the gold sheeting that must have once covered this piece, an inlaid gold sheeting that must have once covered it. Yeah. And then the royal name, scroll down to the name of Ramses II, perfectly explains that if you remove the carefully engraved gilded name, then you have to put something back. And we just have a simple pen and ink drawing over the yellow washed wood. But in terms of magical efficacy, that seems appropriate. That seems enough. And in some cases, you don't have that on the container, the body container at all. In KV35, there are many divine effigies where you only have such an inscription on the body, on the shroud of the piece, and then the coffin is just, you know, whatever they're able to come up with. And sometimes you see kings put into coffins that are not marked for them. So, but it seems to have been important to mark the coffin, particularly the most important kings like Ramses II. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about it, because to the modern viewer, it might seem a bit slapdash, just like, oh, we're just going to scribble on here, make sure we add the name of the king. But so what you're saying is that they would have been thinking about it in a more considered way and not necessarily thinking about it as something less, ritually speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think they know it's something less. I think we know it's something less. And they knew, the kings knew it was something less. But to make that exchange work, they then tried to give something more that we cannot see. Some sort of ritual incantation, over the top sort of magical transformation that was an improved state for the king, in a sense, in their perception. So it's not materialized necessarily in the same way, but they knew materially this was less. And that's kind of why that long hieratic text is there. It's like, look, we know we came in and we took some shit and we had to use it, but we're here to restore and reosirify. And it's kind of a mea culpa. It's kind of a legal, like, we had to. We don't really have a choice in this, because we can't just leave this gold here. We need it. We need it now. And thank you so much, O King. And so we're going to put this little text here, but we at least have priestly abilities and we're going to give you that. So it is an exchange, but it's taking material for ritual activity. And that's what I argue in Recycling for Death, in that book.
Yeah, this is interesting to think about. And we've discussed this many times on this podcast, that the ancient Egyptians can hold two completely contradictory thoughts in their head at the same time, just as we can, and we do for ourselves. So they acknowledged that it was less, but the ritual transformed it into something not less.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying here?
If you really want to take it farther, you can turn this into a patriarchal gaslighting, if I may put my feminist hat on, because it's, you know, the only reason you need to add gold and lapis lazuli and carnelian and all of this stuff to a coffin and socially separate one person and make them into a god is because of a patriarchal complex society that demands that you have that hierarchy, and that some people are special and some people are not, and that we have to serve them and we owe them a debt and all of these things. Read David Graeber's book on debt and you get a better understanding of how those things might work economically. And then, you know, when that system breaks down and, you know, you've buried all these treasures with these kings and you're like, these are inviolable, they will be there forever, we're going to support them forever, but then, but we can't. And so you get this understanding within the patriarchal system that they gaslight themselves about how to justify what they're doing, because they have to. There's no other means of doing it. And I think that I could really, I talk about this in Recycling for Death, but I think I could talk about this a little bit more, the stories we tell ourselves, how we talk to a populace and say, oh, well, the gods need us to do this, and we have to do this. How you turn a prosperity gospel around that's 400 years old, you know, Tutmosis IV on the up and up, making Egypt great again. How you turn it around and say, oh, well, he's now on our side to work through this difficult time period, and soon we're going to be on the up and up. it's like another time travel. It's like going back into time and taking prosperity from an older time, pulling it into the now. And then to avoid an angry dead, you have to kind of gaslight the kings themselves in a way. So yeah, it's like, here's some yellow paint, here's your name,
Yeah,
here's the Uranus.
we
Yeah.
humans are complex creatures.
Yeah.
The circles we walk ourselves in to make things right in our own minds
This is
is
why I love
pretty
new
amazing.
materialism, the
Yeah.
theory of new materialism, that materiality and creating something materially traps you. The Egyptians have created a trap with all of this social separation, and that those 5% get a coffin, and you 95%, you guys don't get coffins. You're going to rot. We're not going to rot. We have this black magic that keeps our bodies intact forever. You guys don't get any of that. There are unintended consequences and traps laid hundreds of years down the line for that kind of thinking, because then you have to keep it up. And we must also remember, and have not said yet in this episode, that Tutmosis III would almost certainly have been buried in nests and layers of materiality. He didn't just get one coffin. He almost certainly had 3 coffins and a mask and a sarcophagus and the shrines and all of these other things. Maybe they didn't have the full developed set like they did for Tutankhamun, but maybe they did. They had something that was more than one coffin. And they probably in the late 20th were like, okay, we're going to let him keep 2 of his coffins. We're going to take the solid gold one. We'll leave him with 2 wooden ones that have gold sheeting. And then in the early 21st, they're like, oh my God, we have to take that. Let's give him some gold leaf. Show him to the high priestess. They don't think we've taken too much. And then we'll, bury him again and reosirify him. Oh my God, we need that gold leaf. Take him out. Inside now, we take the gold leaf. Oh, we got to repaint it. So it's this constant trap that you lay for yourself that you have to then get yourself out of again and again and again. And it's kind of interesting to see the patriarchal anxiety and trying to fix it. They're like, oh shit, we said that we were going to do these things and now we're taking it, but we're going to fix it. We're going to make it good. And the line in the sand just keeps, what do they call it? A moving target.
Yeah.
This is very much a moving target for how you keep your king socially separated and thus keep yourself socially separated. Because by diminishing their kings of the past, they diminish themselves, the men who are doing this, the men in charge. So it's interesting to see how it all pans out.
And another way to look at it too is they also are elevating themselves by allowing themselves access and proximity to these talismans, as you refer to it. So like I said, it's complicated. You go through and the scale balances one way and then it goes another way. And so it's just this constant dance,
right,
that they're doing to make it right.
And it's such an interesting thing. I am not here to diss Egyptian magic. I am not here to throw shade on Egyptian religion. I think it's an amazing and beautiful thing, right? But in the same way that the cult of Jesus, which is an amazing and beautiful thing, can be weaponized to support Christo-nationalist fascism, you can use Egyptian religion to support a totally unequal patriarchal system that does not serve most. It serves the few. And that is indeed what we see here. We see the magic being marshaled for this purpose. And when you marshal magic for power, you're going to get this kind of an unintended consequence, slippery slope falling down the way as you're trying to keep your kings strong in the eyes of the people and yourself thereby, and yet you're taking all of their stuff at the same time. It's very interesting to see. Arguably, this coffin is like, it's like describing what we're going through now in some ways, right? And the United States, as it takes from the outside, it'll take from Colombia, it'll take from Mexico, it'll take from Africa, and then they can't take from these places anymore. They become developed to stop the taking, and then they start taking from the people on the inside, and then they start to fight each other. And it's just, that's how patriarchy works. You can't expect it to work any other way. And collapse highlights that. And here you see the rich eating the rich, but it's within a time travel perspective. I think we should also imagine the rich eating the rich in the late 20th and 21st dynasties, but in real time, in a way that we cannot see. But this coffin preserves it in a sense. So Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing the stories that you can just extract from a collection of objects.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why we're here.
Let's stay
Yeah, that's
there and jump to human agency. What do you think?
okay, sure. You want to stay with
Yeah.
this coffin?
Yeah, because Thomas the Third's coffin is all hemajang, is my Hawaiian kama'aina Hawaiian husband would say. Hemajang is a lovely pidgin for it's all messed up.
It's fajacked.
It's
Fajacked is the
fajacked is
Karakuni term.
It's true. Fajacked works too. But so it's got the eyes are hardly there, the nose is sheared off, the ears are barely hanging on the coffin of Tutmosis III because they wanted that gold in the last instantiation of removal. In this coffin, they've already taken all the gold. I had all of our team look square centimeter by square centimeter for any remnants of gold leaf, and there is nothing on this coffin. There is no gilding left. So that's already gone. And then they prettied it up. But the next thing, that if you're removing all of that precious material that would have had inlaid eyes, that would have had inlaid brows, other elements of the face, hands covered with gold, you need to replace those things. You need to give the king, the divine effigy, human agency. He needs to be able to see, to smell, to breathe, to speak, to hear. He needs to be able to grasp with his hands.
What does he need to grasp?
Amber, would you like to tell us? Do you want me to do it?
The crook and the flail, but also think
I know
of,
it's your job.
I know what I'm doing too. But the crook and the flail, but also the phallus, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about facilitating rebirth here. So the hands are not an afterthought.
No, they are not. And even on coffins that don't have arms, you've got little hands poking out because you need that to, not always, there are coffins without hands, but the hand became pretty important in the New Kingdom because he does need to reach out, grab his phallus, bring himself back to life, and in the manner of Osiris. And this is something that is depicted in the most sacred spaces of Egyptian temples. If you don't believe me, just start looking for those things and you will see it. So yeah, that human agency is restored. And I would like to point out, and I put this in print elsewhere, that I would love this coffin has been shaved down by many centimeters. I would suggest like 4 or 5 centimeters that this coffin has been shaved down. The fact that it keeps a lot of the stylistic features of the face is extraordinary. But I wonder if those eyes were once inlaid. I wonder if there's plaster in those eye sockets.
I was going to ask that about the eyes.
Yeah. Only way we'll know is a nice simple x-ray. Nice simple x-ray. You'd learn about the eyes, you'd learn about the double uraeus. Yeah. I can see the whole of the old double uraeus there. That's great that I can just art historically go in and do a careful examination and observation and see that that's there. But I can't, I'm not going to poke at those eyes and see if they're made of plaster. That's going to have to be done with some other non-destructive scanning technology. But so, I think so. Yeah.
Can I ask, with these, you refer to them as elements of human agency, but could we also, in a way, think of them as elements of divine agency?
Yeah.
Because
what do you mean?
Gods see, hear, speak, grasp, and it's something that has to be restored to everyone, not just kings. They're a necessity. But if you think of ancient Egyptian religion, and if you can't speak, grasp, or see, if you can't hear the incantations or whatnot, like it all seems to play into the capabilities of the divine, of gods.
Yeah, agree completely. And I think it's interesting that as the bodies were mangled and messed up and then had to be rewrapped by the priesthood of Amun, one wonders whether these facial features or human elements like hands and ears took on more importance in the coffin effigy, because there you could perfect it. Whereas you can't fix a human body that's been disembodied, where the arms have come away from the torsos and the head has come away from the spinal column. You can wrap it back together. It is a way of healing, and that mummification exists for that purpose. But then maybe as they know they've pulled a mask away from the face and maybe a nose has come off with it or something, it's that much more important to give a functional human face and human features to the body through the coffin. The coffin and the body work together, in other words.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point, that surely they acknowledged, okay, something might happen to the actual remains, right? The human remains, the mummy. Nose could be damaged, as you point out, or other things could be damaged. And so the ancient Egyptians plans A through Z, right? If this one's damaged, we've got this one. And if you think of just a burial assemblage as a whole, you don't just have the coffin, but often you have other images or effigies, as you might think of them, of the deceased, that could have those elements of agency restored as well. Shopties, statues in general,
yeah,
even maybe a painted image or an image in relief. Like I could see the ancient Egyptians understanding all of those as having those kind of capabilities when it came to agency.
You're so right to remember that these tombs all had these tricked out burials with so many different elements. We don't have their canopic equipment. They're not reburied with canopic equipment. They're not reburied with shopties. They're not reburied with the guardian statues that are supposed to be perfect representations of them proportionally. They have to dispense of all of those things, and all of their coffins set. And in so doing, put everything into this one object with this, well, it's two objects. It's the mummy inside of one coffin, right? And so you can imagine all of the ritual incantations that had to go into making this one piece that effective. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I wonder if because as you have pointed out, this is such a stripped down version. I wonder then if that all that ritual, the incantations and such, became ever more complicated because it needed to cover for and compensate for more and more.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I mean, we'll never know, but
no.
Just an interesting thought.
Well, you kind of do know in a way, because you kind of see in the oracle of Nessie Khonsu the kind of ritual incantation that would go into encircling the heart of the deceased and simultaneously divinizing them. The length and breadth of ritual that goes into it, the fact that they wrote it down and included it in the cache, that we have that preserved. You do have some elements of the complexity of ritual that goes along with it, little things that are recorded here and there. There are little tells for the kinds of ritual that they're including.
That's an excellent point. And can you remind people who Nessie Khonsu is?
Yeah, Nessie Khonsu, I'm trying to think I can grab the book right here. So the best place to find it is in Robert Rittner's The Libyan Anarchy. Unfortunate name, Libyan Anarchy. I have problems with both of these words potentially, but she is one of the highly placed women attached to the high priesthood of Amun in the 21st dynasty, and was reburied in a reused coffin set. The name of Isidem Khabit was removed, and then Nessie Khonsu was put in, which to me suggests that Nessie Khonsu's coffin set was very fancy and was recommodified entirely for its wood, its gold, its precious materials, all of those things. And they're like, oh, but she's important and maybe more important than Isidem Khabit. So they put her in that other coffin set. And in so doing, I argue they had to create, we have the preservation of the actual incantations that accompanied that transformation from one state in her own original coffin set to another state in somebody else's reused coffin set. But her heart encircled such that she would not become one of the angry dead. We have to imagine these kinds of things were done for the kings as well, as a protective element for those in the here and now, but also to give back for what has been taken.
Okay, so help me understand here. So this incantation, this inscription for Nessie Khonsu, when was it created? Was it created for her original burial or only when it was reused?
Nobody really knows.
Because I just remember in the text, doesn't she talk about her husband and you better not mess with my burial?
I think it's almost certainly for a dead woman.
Okay.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But whether it's done like right at her I don't think it's done right at her burial. I think it's done in a later, when she's reburied. Can I prove this? Do I have my time machine to go back in time? Absolutely not. Can somebody else make a counter argument? Potentially, yes. But I think it's there's enough defensiveness and anxiety preserved in the text that somebody's not doing something
It is
right.
very defensive and very anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
completely agree with that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, this is very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I see that. Um, but so I think we only have one thing to look at that's left, because we talked about replacing gold, we talked about replacing earth, we talked about human agency, we talked about replacing kingship. The last
Oh,
thing is to just, oh, go ahead.
oh, with the protective iconography, the only thing
Yeah.
that I wanted to ask about was the goddesses and birds.
Yeah, exactly. So
Oh, okay,
that's
that's
what
where
we
you're
have.
going. Okay,
That's
yeah.
exactly what we have left. We talked about the red paint and a bit of the sky goddess, but I think, other iconography like the rishi, feathers, the pectoral that you might put on the chest, or a collar of some kind, the Horus heads that are there in the corners of the collar that are preserved in some cases. I think those things are sometimes preserved, and sometimes you can see that they've been added in a sense. So yeah, we can look at Kamoza. Um, I didn't. Oh yeah, I didn't include him in my list. Apologies to those Egyptologists in the know that I didn't include seven. I was only looking at 18th dynasty coffins, and thus I included second and Reitao, but I didn't include the two Intefs, and I didn't include Kamoza. So those things are these are royal coffins made with Nemi's headdresses, and important to keep in mind. The coffin of Kamoza is super interesting because it's a Rishi style coffin, but arguably has been stripped of gilding. And I think people have looked at this and said, oh, this is the original coffin of Kamoza. I don't think it is. I think it's been repainted. I think that precious material has been pulled away, and then it's been redone, maybe very late, maybe 20th, 21st dynasty, and then put into a special cache to reosirify him. But the elements of the collar are put onto this. The striations of the Nemes as an iconography. The Nemes is like, remember, Egyptian crowns are like gods and goddesses of their own, mostly goddesses. They're containers, right? And I don't think, does he have a pectoral, this guy? No, we have the figure of the divine goddess. I can't remember if it's a vulture, or it looks vulture like, but the feminine goddess on the chest that's protecting, wrapping her wings around the deceased. And of course, the whole coffin, the Rishi coffin, being covered with feathers. It's meant to be the divine goddess wrapping her body around the deceased, so that he's inside of the sky. He's inside of the goddess herself.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that I believe you've made it in the past, just thinking of goddesses as containers.
Mm-hmm. Vessels,
Yeah, vessels,
wombs, vulvas,
mm-hmm.
vaginas, uteruses,
Passageways, facilitators,
mm-hmm.
moving from one place to another.
Which is beautiful in its own right. But you
Mm-hmm.
put that into patriarchy, and what do you
Mm-hmm.
get? You get an exploited body.
Exploitation.
You get
Yes.
exploitation, and somebody who's used up, and somebody who's only valued when they're young and not valued when they're old. So again, no shade on what the female body can do. No need to discount it and say, oh my God, it's horrible that I contain. Instead, think about what the containment does within a particular system, a system that we are, I think, at the beginnings of recognizing is a problem, and thus moving out of, right? We have
Yeah,
to.
it's at once an essential divine element, but as you point out, very much exploited, particularly in society and the way it plays out in
Yeah.
women's lives.
Yeah. So we've looked at sky goddesses, we looked at the rishi, we've looked at the collar. And I think, those are the protective iconographic elements that are added to these different coffins. So I do want to add that, there's also, particularly with this coffin of Kamoza in front of us here, that if you could add a polychromy back, I think that was desired. So here you see blues and reds and yellows and maybe even some greens. Adding a polychromy provides that multifaceted, mineral rich world of the colors of life, and the blue being associated with the hair of the gods, and we have it here on the headdress, and his eyebrows, right, his beard. It's an expensive mineral, so it comes with the idea of wealth and value, and I think those are important features to remember as well.
Absolutely. And colors don't just reflect the colors of life, they reflect the colors of that materiality too, and
Yeah.
those precious materials that were often used for royal burials.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have anything else you wanna add to this?
No, I think the only other question that I would have is, do you have anything that you want to say about just the idea of restoring coffins originally made for kings? It is.
I'm looking at this and I wonder if these eyes were inlaid too. Someone's got to x-ray all these things.
Yes,
It
yeah.
won't be me. They're all in the Nemec now. I can't do this. I'll say, so in response to your question, coffins of kings, I think that there were some kings who were deserving of more material attention and more ritual attention thereby, and some kings who were considered not deserving of that ritual attention. And I have written about this in Recycling for Death and elsewhere, that some kings were in the royal cache with the high priest of Amun in TT 320, and some kings were not. And so some kings were in, some kings were out. And I think that patriarchy in its maintenance of systems is always going to have certain lineages that they want to connect themselves to, and other lineages that are associated with being the bad guy. That competition is inherent to the system. It is part of it. You're with us or against us. You're on our side or you're not. And it seems that the 20th and 21st dynasties are considering the beginnings of things, the early 18th, 17th, early 18th, early 20th, maybe, and early 19th, certainly for Ramses II, as the important kings to include. And the only outlier is Ramses IX, which is super interesting. And somebody needs to do more work on Ramses IX. Was he Theban? Was he like an Amen-Messe of the 20th dynasty? In a sense, Amenmesse being a Theban fighting against Seti II in a kind of civil war. What's up with the regional competition? But that's what patriarchy does. It's competing against itself. So you have this idea of kingship that's meant to envelop and unite. But then here, as we're deciding, well, I want that divine effigy. I don't want that one. There's a competition inherent within it, and that's really interesting to see.
Yeah, it very much is. I think we've done a great job of illustrating how complicated
it's kind of like
how many layers there are.
Like today, you'd have the Trump regime saying we want Andrew Jackson's portrait in the White House, and we're going to take down Lincoln, right? We're going to take down JFK. We're going to rip up his rose garden. We don't want Kennedy. And so you have who's in and who's out. What we have preserved here is just who's in for these particular high priests in the beginning of the 22nd dynasty, when they preserve them all at the end. That's what we've got.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So
this is great. Let me stop sharing my screen there. There we go.
Oh, so thank you, Amber, for having this fun conversation. I really enjoyed it. And
yeah, of course. I think it'll make a great compliment to the first episode that we did on the coffin of Tutmosis III, because there's always so much more to get into.
There is. You can always talk more and more. And then we always manage to get a feminist angle, which is really fun. So
it doesn't take much of a push.
It really doesn't. I'm like, oh, I'll go there. Okay, I'll go. So thank you all for listening. Thanks for being a part of our little community. Make sure you find us on Substack if you're not already there. All of our content is free. Join us as a free subscriber so you get your email and you know when we're doing what. If you're able to support Jordan and Amber, I appreciate it. That $5 a month is massive for helping me to pay them, because I do pay them. So if you can be a paid subscriber, I would be ever so grateful. Just thanks for being a part of all of this, and we'll see you on the next episode of
Afterlives of Ancient Egypt.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you to our listeners for your support, and please subscribe. If you enjoyed the show, share it with all your friends, and most importantly, leave us a 5-star review. Send all those ancient world questions and topic suggestions for future episodes to ancientnow@substack.com. We actually do read them all. You can find info on all my books, articles, and upcoming lectures on my website. Just head to karakuniegyptologist.com. Amber puts all of that together. Oh my God, thank you, Amber. Check out our Substack Ancient Now at ancientnow.substack.com, where we share perspectives on all that history and archaeology news every week and continue the conversations that happen after the podcast mic is turned off. Support the show by becoming a paid subscriber at our Substack Ancient Now community. This keeps the show free for everyone, and paid status gives you access to our archives. Thank you to our current supporters. I'm at all the social medias. Look for @Karakuni. Thanks to the team at Patina Productions for this podcast, which I must point out is wholly separate from my academic work at UCLA. See you next time on Afterlives of Ancient Egypt.